In this video, I'm going to show you how I derive two corner swap algorithms that I presented in a previous video I've done. As you can see on this 4x4 cube, two corners that are adjacent are swapped while the rest of the cube appears to be solved. On the other hand, here is another case that I had algorithms to in that video, where they're diagonal to each other while the rest of the cube appears to be solved. As I mentioned in the video, instead of doing a T-perm plus PLL parity for the adjacent corner swap, that is, doing a T-perm plus PLL parity, where in the T-perm we swap two corners and two edges like that, and then PLL parities we swap two edges oppositely, and then the net result will be just swapping two corners. And note on the 4x4, we're actually not swapping two edges. We're swapping four edge pieces in a specific way. So if I show the permutation diagram for the T-perm and the PLL parity for the 4x4 would look like this, where these are swapped in that fashion. This edge piece comes here and that edge piece goes there. This edge piece goes here and that one goes there, and then two corners swap. That's actually what a T-perm on a 4x4 does. Instead of doing that, or an N-perm plus PLL parity for the diagonal two corner swap case, instead we can do something different. As you can see, these algorithms are totally different than if you were to do a T-perm plus PLL parity. For example, where you have a 3x3 part entirely, and then you have moves which include the inner layers, which is definitely a 4x4 algorithm. Instead of having that, we have algorithms which have 4x4 moves in them randomly. And in fact, if you compare these to odd parity algorithms, such as this single edge flip algorithm, which does this, we can see some sort of resemblance. And this is no coincidence, for this is actually how I make these corner swap algorithms from these single edge flip algorithms. But before I explain that, I first have to introduce you to double parity algorithms. If you already know what this is, then this should just be a quick review, but a double parity algorithm is an algorithm which flips one edge. Second, it swaps two edges afterwards. One of the edges swapped is the edge which was flipped, so that the overall result looks something like this, where we can see that only one edge is flipped on the cube, and we have these two edges swapped oppositely. We're going to be combining a single edge flip algorithm with a double parity algorithm to make a two corner swap algorithm. But why do we do this? Well, first of all, for speed solving, usually people don't just turn the inner layers for this algorithm, because in order to have this algorithm you must turn just the inner layers. These lowercase letters indicate just moving the inner layer slices. But for speed solving purposes, this algorithm is not commonly practiced like that. Instead, all of the slice turns are converted to wide turns, or moving the outer layer and the inner layer at the same time. And for those of you who are familiar with Rubik's notation, RW, for instance, is equal to R star. It just represents moving the outer layer and the inner layer on the right side at the same time. Maybe you're familiar with it being written like this. Applying this algorithm to the cube, we have this, where it swaps two corners adjacently, it swaps two edges this way, and it flips one edge here. What's more important is if we see what happens with a double parity algorithm, such as this one, which again yields this result. What happens if we turn its single slice turns into wide turns? If we do, and we apply it to a cube, well, we see that we have something similar to the single edge flip algorithm case, except for now if we just add in U2 to restore back as much as possible, we can see that we have two corners swapped and one edge flipped, just as we did with the old parity one, except for now these two edges here, they're not swapped anymore. So adding that U2 in, we can see that that is in fact this. So this is where my idea came in. What you do is, you need a single edge flip algorithm to flip this edge, and you combine it with this result right here, so that the net result, well, if we take this and we combine it with the single edge flip algorithm, apply both to a cube, just like this, the net result is 2 corners swapped while the rest of the cube appears to be solved. And what I mean by appears to be solved is that if we make this a 4x4 supercube or picture cube which shows the centers, we can see that this center right here is rotated 180 degrees and this center is rotated 90 degrees. This center has to be rotated 90 degrees because we swapped 2 corners, and this one has to be rotated 180 degrees because we applied standard edge flip algorithms to this cube. But we really don't have to worry about those centers being rotated like that. All we need to think of is just that we have 2 corners swapped. Now these corners, they're not oriented correctly as they are in, for example, this algorithm. When this algorithm is applied to the cube, we can see that they are oriented correctly. So there's a few steps that you have to take to get this final result, but I'm going to just go step by step, and instead of just deriving this algorithm or this algorithm for the adjacent cases, or this algorithm for the diagonal cases, what I'm going to do is just show you a general procedure, and then you can, with knowing how to create edge flip algorithms from my other derivation videos, for example, I called one the standard algorithm derivation or something like that, and then another one was Lucas parity, and then the third one was another single edge flip algorithm. Those 3 represent a lot of different type of parity algorithms of this type. So if you study those, then you can learn how to make others using the same process. What I'm first going to do is make an adjacent corner swap algorithm with the corners oriented correctly, of course. What I'm going to do now is take the standard single edge flip algorithm, which does this, of course, and as I said earlier, it rotates the top center 180 degrees, or if you look at it in a more general sense, on the 5x5 you can see that it swaps these 2 1x3 center blocks. On the 4x4 you can look at it as either swapping 2 1x2 blocks or just rotating the center 180 degrees. The result is the same on the 4x4, but this is not really something we have to focus on, like I said earlier, until the very end. For a similar reason how we make these algorithms, we have to swap the same color with the same color, but I'll show that at the end. But first off, taking this algorithm and rewriting it like this, where the first 2 half-turn moves are inverted at the end like this. Of course, this entire result yields this, but if we take these out, we have this where 2 edges are swapped oppositely, and this center is swapped with this center diagonally. So we have this piece, and what I have to do, if I want to make a relatively brief 2 corner swap algorithm, I cannot just take a completely different double parity algorithm in Y turns and add it to a completely different single edge flip algorithm, because this move right here won't cancel with this move. And you'll have an algorithm which is 32 moves. And as you've seen earlier, this algorithm, for instance, is 19 moves. And this algorithm is 22 moves. See, we have a very long algorithm here. So how can we make this so that we can combine a single edge flip algorithm with a double parity algorithm in Y turns so that we have a 2 corner swap algorithm? How do we do it so we don't have so many moves? What we have to do is take a single edge flip algorithm's base, that is, its middle part, like this one from the standard algorithm, taking out the outermost setup moves, R2, B2, and B2, R2. Those are setup moves because they're done before an algorithm piece, this one, and they're undone afterwards. So by removing those, we look at the base, and we can see that this is on the left side and this is on the right side. However, suppose that we added a U2 setup move to this, to move this block on this side instead. Now that they're on the same side, suppose we add R2 at the very end of the algorithm. Then at this point, all we have left is 2 1x4 blocks that are unsolved. Now if we go ahead and we add back the set of moves R2, B2, and invert it at the end, of course. We're just swapping them in the same face to make the double parity algorithm. So this is a general procedure to make a double parity algorithm from a single edge flip algorithm. First of all, we take the single edge flip algorithm, we remove its outermost setup moves to have the base. From the base, we adjust it so that the 1x4 block is on the opposite side as the 1x2 center block. And in this case, as I've shown you, all we have to do is add in the setup move U2. When doing that, it goes to the right side. And then 3, we add in R2. Or if it's on the left side, we add in L2. And 4, we just do outermost setup moves to swap them in the same face. In this case, we could do R2, B2, or we could do R2, F2, doesn't matter. Then we have this, a double parity algorithm. And again, a double parity algorithm is an algorithm which flips one edge, and it also swaps two edges, one of the edges being the one that's flipped. So why am I saying all of this? Well, the reason is, if we want an algorithm as brief as these, and not as long as this, by applying a wide turn double parity algorithm plus a single edge flip algorithm, yielding a two-corner swap algorithm, and it's long again because this move does not cancel, the R2 here doesn't cancel the U2. But if we have a wide turn based double parity algorithm, which is similar to the single edge flip algorithm that we are adding to it, then there's a lot of room for cancellations. So I'm going to show you how this works. And just for standard convention, the formula that I'm going to choose to go by, since this can go in more than one way, what I'm going to do is I'm going to have single edge flip algorithm plus the modified single edge flip algorithm, that is the double parity algorithm, in wide turns. So this is the formula. So again, taking the single edge flip algorithm we had, if I copy and paste it now, note that we had to add a U2 move here and invert it afterwards. From that point, we just added in R2. If I apply all this, we have that double parity. If I take out this R2, then if we look at the cube, we have a single edge flip, but the two 1x2 center blocks affected are now discolored. So this is actually what we're going to be combining with the double parity algorithm in order to promote the maximum amount of move cancellations. It's not a visually pure single edge flip algorithm, or again we had the two 1x2 blocks swapped in the same face so that the same color swaps with the same color. So what we need to do at this point, have it like this, so that it's a single edge flip algorithm with messing up two 1x2 center blocks oppositely like that. And at the same time, we take the same thing and we add in the R2 move to again have the double parity algorithm, but we convert this one to wide turns like that. And applying this algorithm to the cube, you can see that what we have to do is B2 at the end so that it restores the cube as much as possible. But you see it flips the same edge as the first piece. So if we add these two together, meaning applying all of this on the cube, oh, and here we also have to add in B2 because as we did before, we had to add it in so we can restore as much as possible. Applying all of this to a cube, the net result we're going to get is two corners swapped as well as the two 1x2 center blocks swapped. It should be expected. But at the same time, this doesn't look very nice. What I'm going to do at this point is I'm going to cancel these two moves so we can see things better. How do these cancel? So from here, I first need to mention something important. This algorithm right here is the same as if we just make the outermost R2 moves wide. Just double checking, we apply it to a cube. It's the same result. Now what we can do is start canceling moves. Let me just move them right next to each other. This R2 and this R2 cancels this B2 and this B2. And from this point, if you just recognize that the first piece consists of single slice L and R turns, and the second one consists of wide L and R turns, then you can recognize that since these algorithms are identical, just that they're inverses of each other, the inner slice of this piece will cancel with the inner slice of the moves in the second piece. So the algorithms are the same up until this RW2 right here, because that RW2 is the one that we added in to be able to swap two 1x4 blocks. This B2R2 is the outermost setup moves of the standard algorithm, and this B2 was the one that we applied to restore the wide turn double parity algorithm as much as possible. So up until this R2, all we have to do is make all of these turns into outer layer turns. And for the first piece, all we have to do is delete those moves, because they cancel with the other ones. From this point, if we apply this to a cube, we get the same result. And at this point, I know we're all eager to cancel moves here. I'll just start from the top. This F2 and F2 goes, and all of these U2s go, leaving us with this. It's the same exact result. From this point, how do we get from that, where we have two corners swapped and that they're not oriented correctly, as well as two 1x2 center blocks discolored, to have the same result as this algorithm, because we're doing the adjacent case. I'll handle the diagonal shortly, where we don't have any center pieces discolored and the two adjacent edges are oriented correctly. How do we do that? This algorithm is 2 moves longer, being 19, than the 17 move algorithm we have here. So we know that if we want to get a 19 move algorithm, and again, this is a general procedure. This does not necessarily mean that I'm deriving the ones below, but if you just try different paths, you can derive all the algorithms that I've shown in that video. All we have to do is something that's a little bit unobvious, but it gives us a way to modify an algorithm into a more useful form. As long as the first move is not the inverse of the last move of the algorithm that we start with at this point, which will never happen when you combine these two together following the procedure that I've shown you, all we have to do is take this algorithm and add setup moves to them that are the inverse of the first move. So in this case, RW2 is inverted with itself, and so it's a setup move, so we have to add it to the end. Applying this to a cube, we can see now that the corners are in a different location. Still the centers are the same, but that moved right there. At the same time, we can interpret this differently. This move and this move will cancel, leaving us with this at the end, which is the same result as if we just take the first move and we move it to the end. So if we move the second move to the end, we have two corners that are adjacent to each other, and look, if we just rotate the cube this way, they are oriented correctly. So we really don't have to do any difficult work at all to get what we need. Now, in order for these two center blocks to be swapped with each other, they need to be on the opposite side of the cube. Moving this move to the end, nothing happens at all because that L does not involve any of the pieces that are on the right side to begin with. But at this point, if we move U2 to the end, now this center block is on the opposite side of the cube as this one. So at this point, if we want to make an algorithm which does not discolor centers, we just add in RW2 at the beginning and invert at the end. And just know we can also use just a lower case R2 as well, because all we're doing is we're taking this 1x2 center block, which was originally not affected, and moving it down here, so that the black one from up here, which goes down here, will swap with this one. So black will swap with black. But why not just have a wide turn, because it's easier to execute? So applying this to a cube, we have a two-corner swap algorithm that does not discolor centers, and in addition has the two corners that are swapped oriented correctly. And now to make them affect the corners just as the same as this one does, like this, all we have to do is add in some cube rotations. So first one maybe we want to do is we have to use a Z prime setup move and invert it with Z. Z prime and Z moves them into the top face. And if you want to leave it here that it swaps those two corners, that's fine. But I just want to move them to the front. So I just have to do one more cube rotation, being Y prime as the setup, Y as the ending, to have this. Let's look at our normal cube. Indeed, we have the same result visually as the other algorithm. It's 19 moves, so there's that algorithm. Before I get into deriving an alternate adjacent corner swap algorithm, for example this one, which just has all U2s in it, I want to give an answer to a very good question that you guys may have. And that is, what is the minimum move count for these type of algorithms? And what do I mean by algorithm type? I'm talking about algorithms like this, where every turn that's L and R are Y turns or outer turns, meaning that they're not an interlayer turn like R or L and so forth. It's 19, and I'll show you why I believe it's 19. First of all, we used an optimal single edge flip algorithm, and of course I'm referring to half turns. And quarter turns, it's definitely not optimal being 25, because I have an algorithm that's 19 in another one of my videos. But in half turns, in this move count, it is optimal being that of 15 moves. And based on the adjustment we made, where we took the base, added a U2 setup move to it, which actually didn't really add any moves at all to it at all. These two moves canceled, leaving you with this as their end result. From that point, we just added R2, and applying this to a cube, we can see that we had the two 1x4 blocks swapped, and the minimum amount of setup moves from this point is to add in R2, B2, and B2, R2 to get a single slice turn double parity algorithm. That is a 16 move algorithm. The minimum amount of moves for a double parity algorithm like this is actually 14, but this is 16, 2 moves more. However, this is a specific type designed to cancel a lot of moves with its corresponding single edge flip algorithm that discolors two 1x2 center blocks. We can see that they will cancel all the way until this R2 move, which is the maximum amount of moves to cancel. And real briefly, before I show you how to derive an algorithm like this with all U2s and R's and L's for the adjacent case, what I'm going to do is show you how to derive a diagonal case. It's very simple. All we have to do is get to this point after we've done the formula and we've canceled all the moves. At this point I didn't cancel them, but if we just go ahead and we cancel them again, and we have this, just applying this algorithm to a cube. Again, we have that. So if we move the first move to the end, we have them like this. And with that B2 again, this is the same stuff we did for the adjacent one. They're like this. And let me just go ahead and shift these two moves because we know we went that far for the adjacent case. Now let's go a little further. This one, if we shift it, won't affect anything because that involves the R slice, which does not contain any of the pieces which are currently messed up. So when we apply it, it stays the same. We know when we shift U2, it will restore back to that same position. So we're left with where we started basically from a few move shifts. When we shift R and U2, applying that to the cube, we get this. Now, this is very interesting because the two 1x2 center blocks are on the opposite side of the cube as each other. So from this point, we can just add an RW2 and make it a two corner swap with the corners unoriented. From that point, we can just do a set of move R prime and undo it with R. Applying this, and this one is 21 half turns, which is the same length as this one. So anyway, and with that one we don't need to add any cube rotations, obviously, because this is the algorithm's result applied on the cube. It's already in the top. And so lastly, how do I get algorithms that consist of all U2 180-degree phase turns and R and L moves? Well, because we derived the first one from a single edge flip algorithm which we adjusted, if we find a single edge flip algorithm which has the same form, we can work from that and build a similar algorithm. So if you've seen the derivation for another single edge flip algorithm video that I have, it consists of 2 parts. I think the second one's just like 3 minutes. It's not a very long video. That algorithm was this one. All the face turns are U2. Applying this to a cube obviously does the same thing. It's just a different algorithm. And note that this algorithm is 18 half turns, which is definitely not optimal. The optimal ones are 15, but this is what we build from. And for this algorithm, if you've seen the derivation for that, we can rewrite this algorithm as the following. R U2 R prime, and then R2. That R2 here and the R prime will cancel to be R, which is that move right there. At the same time, at the end, we want it to be setup move, so it needs to be R U2 R prime to invert this piece. That is, this piece is the inverse of this piece. But in order for that to be true, we have to take what we have right here. Well, we almost have it. If we just split this R2 up into 2 R's and then move this to the end, we have it. So basically what I've just done is just rewrote this algorithm like this, so that we have outermost setup moves. Taking this, it's the same exact thing. Copy and paste this, and now we remove these outermost setup moves, then we have this. Maybe some of you noticed that I didn't really have to do all of that. I could have just done this in one step. But from this point, I can just rewrite this R2 as R prime and R prime, and then space it like this, and move this R there. So this is R prime setup move to what we have here. And if we just combine R U2 R prime, which was the outermost setup moves from the beginning, and invert it at the end, and we can combine these now as R2, and this one as well as R2, so these are setup moves. Applying this to a cube, we get a single edge flip, of course, but if we omit those now, all of the outer setup moves, apply this to a cube, this is the result we have. And just because I'm used to it, I'm going to apply this to a 4x4 supercube and work from there. What we have to do is to make this base from this. I'm going to go ahead and isolate it by itself now. All we have to do is make this into the form where we had a 1x4 block at the top, and beneath it we had the 1x2 center block. And with the first algorithm, recall that all we had to do was add a U2 move, because with the standard algorithm's base was this. So all we had to do was add a U2 setup move, or just move that to the end to get that result. And basically how we got that, we don't have to think of it as a setup move. All we have to do is think is that we're moving the first move to the end, just as we did with the algorithms before, to have the corners oriented correctly and to set up so that we can add one setup move to not discolor the centers. So having that in mind and deleting this, we take this, I'm just going to copy it and paste it. All we have to do is do the same thing to this algorithm. We don't have to think at all. Just move the first move to the end. So we start out with this. Now they're opposite like this. Shift the next move. Now we have what I call an interior J-perm, because if anybody knows what the J-perm is, all we have to do to this to make it a J-perm on the outside is just to convert all of the inner layer turns to outer layer turns. So R prime, U2, R, U2, L prime, U2, R, U2, R prime, U2, L, R prime, U2. Pieces affected will move from the inner layer to the outer layer. And that's why I call this an interior J-perm. So if we continue to shift, so I move the R prime here to the end, shift this U2, and luckily R, when we shift it, will move that 1x2 center block to the bottom, and we have the same exact setup as with the standard algorithm's base. And with the standard algorithm, all we had to do was shift the U2 move that was in front, and it happens to be U2 here. Just have to add in R2, and that will solve back this 1x2 center block as well as this one, and have two 1x4 blocks unsolved, just like with the first one, nothing new. Adding that in. Now we can add an R2, B2, and then invert at the end. It's the same setup, so we can add the same moves. And now we have the double parity algorithm. But that's not what we want. We don't want a B2 here, because we want to have this with all U2s. So let me take those out. In order for us to use U2 again, this needs to be moved up or down. It doesn't matter. So unfortunately, what we have to do is add in one move. Let's just do R prime. Invert it with R. That'll move the two 1x4 blocks like this. And so at this point, just add in a U2 setup move to move this 1x4 block on the left side, so that finally with the R2 move we can take the 1x4 block here, which is unaffected, and put it in the bottom where this one will put here will go. So they swap with each other. So adding in U2 and inverting it at the end. Now they're on the opposite side like I said. So we can conclude with R2 and invert at the end to have a double parity algorithm in the top, and we have all U2s. So what I'm going to do is, since we want to grab this similar single edge flip algorithm that discolors two 1x2 centers, and in this case all we have to do is omit this R2 and apply it to a cube and see what it is. It's this one. The same idea, it's just that now since we have at all U2s, this is the result. But what I'm going to do is take this R2 and I'm going to move it here instead, because this R prime is here and we can just invert it with R just to have all this together. And so we can have, instead of it was, with the original algorithm was R2B2, now it's R2U2. And then we have the R2 at the end. So it's the same structure. So now if I just write all of this on one line and these on a separate line, just as we did with the other algorithm, because we have the R2 on the end here, in order to have the maximum amount of move cancellations, this is the double parity. So we take it, we move it to the bottom, and we add in the single edge flip algorithm, which all we have to do is take that out. Is take the inverse of it now, and I'm just deleting this now, and now we just convert all of these R's and L's to wide turns. This top algorithm is the same as if we convert these two to wide turns, and just taking the double parity algorithm in wide turns, all we have to do is add in U2 to restore the cube as much as possible, similar to the first one we had to add in B2. So that is another U2 move, so we still have all U2s after all of this. We take note of the cancellations now. This RW2 and U2 obviously will cancel with these. And as I've said before, the single slice turns from this piece will cancel with the single slice turns of this piece up until this RW2 move. But actually, what we do from here, it turns out to have the least number of moves instead of doing the same process where we would cancel all of the inner layer slices of L and R here, just delete them, and make these and R and L turns in this piece to outer layer and leave the rest of this alone. Instead of doing that, there's a little trick that we should do first that will yield a 22 move algorithm similar to the 22 adjacent algorithm here, which I showed in the video. If we apply this algorithm to the cube right now, the two 1x2 center blocks are in the F and back faces. They need to be in the top because the only face turn we have is U2. And if we want to separate them so that, for instance, one is here while the other one is here, the only way to separate them is to put them into the top layer. If we were to delete all the inner layer slices from this piece and converting all these up until this point into outer turns, then we would have an algorithm which the only wide turns we have would be double. It would be this one, and this one. But we need some single quarter wide turns to put the 1x2 center blocks in the top. So what we have to do, if we want to keep this algorithm brief, is to merge this RW2 with this one to have RW prime. By having RW prime, we'll convert all these two outer turns until that point, and maybe it's better since we have something a little peculiar, we just go one move at a time. So this R is deleted and it cancels with the inner layer portion of that wide turn there. Then this, the same, this one with this one, this one with this one, this with this with this with this one, and this one with that one. we have an even number of U2s here, so we can just delete them all. And by doing that, we can still get away with not having an inner layer slice turn, because this R prime here will merge with this R prime for the outside as a Y turn. And that's all move cancellations that we can do. Instead of shifting the algorithm one piece at a time, if we just grab this mini and shift it to the end, all we have to do is add an RW2 to the beginning and invert it at the end to preserve the colors of all the centers. And from this point we can do cube rotations to put this here just as we did with the other one. So from this point, if we wanted to make a diagonal algorithm, if we go back to the piece before we shifted any, it turns out that if we shift all of these moves, we have this. And what we do, even though that this R prime is after this L, since these two are in opposite phases, we can just shift this R prime by itself. We have a perfect set for the diagonal case because we have a corner and a center block on the left half of the cube in the top layer, and we have the other corner and the 1x2 center block on the other side, or the right half of the cube. And if we add our R2 move, that corner will move here, which is diagonal to this one, and based on their current position, if they are swapped in the same face, they will be oriented correctly. Adding RW2 and then inverting it at the end, we have a 22 move diagonal corner swap algorithm, and for this one you don't have to add any cube rotations at all. And so that's basically it. That's how I made these algorithms. Instead of doing a T-perm plus the PLL parity is equal to the two corner swap, all we had to do was take a single S-flip algorithm and modify it to make it into a inner layer slice turn double parity algorithm, and then we made that double parity algorithm into Y turns and added that extra face turn at the end to restore the cube as much as possible. Then we inverted the single S-flip algorithm so that the inner layer slices from the single S-flip algorithm would cancel with the inner layer portions of the Y turns for the double parity algorithm. And note that the single S-flip algorithm also discolored two 1x2 center blocks, but with shifting the moves, we handled that later by setting up for the outermost setup moves to swap them.